Hi, and welcome to Start a Conversation. My name is Dr. Shani Byard. I'm the owner of Message Media Education. We're actually a professional development training organization that helps people become aware of how media influences their perception of each other and themselves. Today we're going to be working and talking through racism within the framework of what's called Afro media literacy. The definition that we're using for today in terms of what racism is from Beverly Tatum. She says, racism is an intricate web of individual attitudes, cultural messages, and institutional practices that systemically advantages whites and disadvantages people of color. So with that said, and thinking about how different people within this institutional racism that we all sort of navigate throughout today, I'm wondering how you have been media stereotyped and what that experience is like.
Well, for me, I'll say that growing up, there was one of two things. I grew up in Chicago on the South Side, and there were one of two things that I wanted to become. I wanted to rap, and I thought I could make it to the NFL. Mm-hmm. My mom took me out of Chicago public schools for high school. I went to a school where they were all basically white kids. And what they thought they could become, no kid that I grew up thought that he or she could become. Mm-hmm. So it really came down to whenever we turned on the TV, we saw this, and they saw this as well, which is also where racism started. Right. And we saw this of ourselves, whereas they saw that of themselves. So the expectations that we had of ourselves, which is no different today, really starts in imagery and the power of media. And unfortunately, I feel that any group who is not a group which is or collectively has power, then you are subverse to seeing yourself as a lesser version of those who have power. And being African American or Black, naturally I saw myself in very, very few things, and they usually involved entertaining a group of people.
I grew up in Brazil. I was born in Rio, and I grew up very poor in the favelas of Rio. But I had two white grandmothers and a native grandmother. I had three. I was lucky enough to have three grandmothers. And so what they instilled in me is that I could do and be anything. But I have a black grandfather, two black grandfathers, and my father is Black. Well, was Black, he just passed away. And I wanted to be a stewardess. My father would say to me, oh, Black girls cannot be stewardess. Because for my father, I am a Black girl. Then I wanted to be a ballerina. Oh, no. My father again told me, no, Black girls cannot be ballerinas. To me, I absolutely could be and do anything, but my Black father said, no, you cannot. So that was my experience.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's something about when you mention stereotypes, because I think, you know, being a white male and being Irish Scottish, there's a stereotype. I'm drinking all the time. You know, that kind of stereotype exists. And it's not necessarily true with me or other people that are white or Scottish Irish. So I think that stereotypes, on the other hand, there are a lot of Irish Scottish that drink a lot. And I think there's stereotypes that do exist, and I think sometimes we have to separate stereotypes and racism. We have to sort of separate those stereotypes in that if it's said in a bad way, if it's said in a negative way, then it becomes something that's racist. But if it's said sort of as, hey, all our group, you know, like, so a group of Irish Scottish people will sort of get together and go, you're a bunch of drunks, you know, ha ha ha, we all laugh about that. It may not be true, but because that, as a gathering of people that are all of like nature, that can be looked at as a way of identity. But
I think the problem with that, though, is that these are the only images that are depicted of us. And so what we can dream of, what we can think that of ourselves and what we can be are limited by these stereotypes that are constantly perpetuated in the media.
Whether
And then
they're
further,
positive or negative.
Whether they're positive or negative. And you think of Darren Wilson, for example, who said, oh, he looked like, you know, a monster, he was attacking me. And, you know, these are the images that are depicted of blackness, that we're bad, that it's a terrible thing, like that we're aggressive or only football players or a Jezebel slut or all of these things. And so then others see us as that as well. And that influences our abilities for jobs, for the work that we do, for the interactions we have in a day-to-day.
And you know, this is one of the big reasons why I don't watch television and why I became a YouTuber, actually. We are in this new era now where your kids are going to be content creators, or they are content creators, and they have the power as social media influencers, when they reach a critical mass, to influence others and show a different stereotype that they may not have seen. Like, I'm trying to show the stereotype that Latinos are highly educated and that we're very intelligent. That's the stereotype that I want to plant. I want them to see something different. And television, unfortunately, was not providing that. That, you know, they were showing us as thugs, as uneducated people who mowed your lawns and, you know, fixed your cars. And, you know, you have to see yourself reflected. Otherwise, you know, you start to believe these things, that I can only be a football player or a rapper.
Well, I want us to really think about the benefits. Who benefits from racial stereotypes? Who benefits from slavery? The dominant elite, right? Who built this wealth off of ensuring that these people feel less than and are stuck in one place. Who owns sports franchises?
Who owns the
Right?
prisons?
Who owns the prisons? So there's one layer of having to deal with being stereotyped, right? And there's the other layer of the actual impact. And then there's also the benefit of how these racial stereotypes sustain a system of white elite power that we always need to kind of think about. So it's good to really think about racism on a systemic level. How is this benefiting the larger picture here, right?
Well, and I'll speak to that. I don't actually think in the big picture there is any benefit, period, to holding someone down or limiting their potential. Because you're talking about removing the idea or the spark of creativity, the spark in that person that says, I'm going to get out there and I'm going to contribute something amazing to the world. From a financial standpoint, yes. Whether you're talking about slavery of the Jews or African Americans in U.S. culture, there was a financial gain. You were building something, you were enslaving a people and making them feel less than so that you could rise up on their shoulders. You know, there's no avoiding that concept that there's a financial gain. I don't necessarily know that, you know, in this day and age, in 2015, that we have, you know, that same thing happening.
Oh, I beg to differ.
No, let me finish. From a financial standpoint where you have one person oppressing another people, I think we all contribute in different ways. You know, I've been told I can't sit at the table because I'm a girl. You know, there's a lot.
What table would you be told that?
Right.
For business. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I've absolutely been told.
But
that
it is a business. It is. We are sustaining and supporting. I wish I had the rose-colored glasses that you have, and that everyone would actually be seen for what they can contribute. But the reality that it isn't, because I work with the UN Women. Under the umbrella of women, we are women, and it's like we have that. The
sisterhood.
The sisterhood. The difference is that my experience and your experience is not the same as a woman in the workplace. Because I am a woman of color. I am going to be treated in a different manner than you are going to be treated. But when we are together, there's a sisterhood. We're trying to improve it. But the reality out there is totally different. In the industry that I work, for instance, in Los Angeles, which is one of the largest, this is a professional association that I belong to, our demographic is white women over 40. I'm actually an aberration inside of my own organization. That is my reality. So in terms of racism, and all, even though we are women and working on the same causes, our experiences are different, very different. And I guarantee you that I probably am being paid at least 20 to 30% less than a white female that does not have 1/3 of what I have to offer in my industry. That's a given.
Well, and I think, one of the reasons why I want to encourage, saying that it's not just a white versus issue is that I've been impacted in very meaningful ways by people that were excluding me from their group because I was a white person. And I think that we all, in any culture or any race, experience those things. If I see this beautiful Latina girl on the playground in elementary school and she's sitting there with her girlfriends and I want to go over and play and they say, no, you're not going to hang out with us because you're some white girl or whatever, that's racism.
That's actually discrimination.
When I hear things like that, and it's nothing against you, obviously, because your experiences, these are isolated events that you could probably count on two hands in your entire life, the amount of times that happens. Whereas, if you're looking at, if it's a comparison, she can probably tell you daily things that you'd never be able to say just because of how you perceive versus how she's perceived. And that's not going to change.
We have a black president, and I am afraid because my 30-year-old black son is going to be killed when he's leaving his office in downtown Los Angeles. So how do we explain that?
So the white conservative would say it's because of the fact that the president has made racism an issue, which to me, it's the opposite, is that because now it's become more upfront that we're dealing with racism a lot more. We hid it. It was something we put in our pockets back when President Bush was president or even Bill Clinton, But now it's an issue that we have to address. We're having this conversation. And I think because of that, you get both the good parts of that conversation plus the ugly side, which is the stuff
I
you're
think the only way to begin healing from racism, which is a power structure, we have to really see it for what it is. We have to not individualize it.
Right.
Calling someone a racial slur is not an example of racism, right? Racism is a power structure. Peggy McIntosh is a woman who wrote a paper about white privilege and what that is and how it's an invisible knapsack of things and values that are assets that are unearned. Right? And her first statement is, I was taught to see racism only in individual acts of meanness, not in invisible systems conferring dominance on my group. Right? So how are we unconsciously playing a role is the question in sustaining racism?
I
Thinking
excluded
systemically.
myself from the media structure. I had the opportunity. I have a degree in electronic media management, cinema, television arts. And I said, this is not the system that I want to play in, so I don't support it. And I think that what we can do is not consume these things that we don't agree with, and not just complain about it. I mean, there's always someone else that we can point to as the source of our problems. Who can say, it's the white man's problem that we have crime in our neighborhoods, but it's a Hispanic kid that shot that black kid. It's a black kid that shot that black kid. Let's take some responsibility ourselves and do something about it. My choice was to go into YouTube and create the alternative that I wanted to see. You have to be the change that you want to see in the world. Great quote, and I'm living it.
I think as African Americans, we're not doing much.
No.
Collectively, I don't think we're doing much. I think it's 90-10 with everything. We talked about power in the last question. I think that the power knows that 10% are going to be different, 90% are going to be the same. And so I think that whatever image they have of themselves, the 90% are going to follow that. I think that the tough thing, good parenting is great, but good parenting isn't stronger than the media. for many parents. So I think it's a thing where I don't think that we're doing enough, and I don't think it's because collectively we don't know what to do. You know, I don't think enough conversations are being had. I don't think enough action is being taken by people who are within those communities to actually work with the people who have the problems. I think that in order for anything to change, I can only speak from my experience. You know, you have one Barack Obama, you have 5,000 rappers.
Right.
So just a sheer numbers game, we perpetuate it by giving ourselves a constant reinforcement that this is all that you can do.
I think that turning off things that you feel don't connect with what you want to be out there is important. I think that spending your money to support organizations that are doing good, powerful things in communities is an important way to let your money talk.
And especially about like supporting content that does kind of go against the norm or the stereotypes. So like supporting a show like The Unwritten Rules, for example. Do you know what I mean? Or supporting a show where you wind up like going to the movie theaters and supporting an Ava DuVernay film. Do you know what I mean? Like going to support content that does not necessarily perpetuate the stereotype.
Absolutely, and if I can, I think the hard part specifically with music, because music is such a powerful form of art. The problem with music is that I read a statistic about 3 years ago that said that about 68% of people who purchase hip-hop music are white kids.
Yes.
And so the issue with that is it's not the black kids who are buying it. Now, it isn't the group who has the negative reflection who's supporting it. It's the group who doesn't, because for them it's entertainment. It's never.
And
not
further,
their
it's
reality.
them that are orchestrating the strings of these
Because it
artists.
makes them money.
I
It's
think,
money.
I think that
And the problem is not just it's not whiteness. It's with inherent privilege that comes with it. So it's not an attack on like white folks in general or anything like that, but more so like how can we look at the ways in which they are granted, right? They have this knapsack of tools already that they can use and are using and have been using for centuries. I think that's like a key thing to keep in mind in these conversations. It's not like we are attacking whiteness, we're attacking the privilege that comes with it.
No, I'm attacking whiteness. I mean, in a way I am, because
We're not
the thing is,
attacking white people.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
but
Correct.
the thing, you know, I had a friend in this, when I lived in Atlanta for 10 years, and in Atlanta, most of my friends, my black friends would say, the South is, in a way, I know who's a racist and who's not a racist. But up north, I grew up in New England, and in New England, they were like, there you don't know, because, like you said, the privilege have ways to sort of pretend they're not racist, or they're liberal, but we're not racist. You know, this kind of thing. And for my friends that were black in the South, they said, I'd rather know right off the bat if somebody's a racist, then I know, versus that this sort of pretend stuff. So I think
I moved to New England. I went to school. I went to Harvard,
Yeah.
and so I always had this idea that if I make it there, everyone's gonna love me. You know, they're gonna love me.
Right.
And then I got there, and I never felt comfortable.
yeah.
I never really felt like I was supposed to be there.
Yeah.
And so it was a you can do it until you do it, and once you do it, we don't actually want you here. We didn't really want you to do it. We just want to tell you that. You know, and so
I identify with that very much.
you know, and so it's but hey, I'm convinced that one way to eradicate it all, I'm convinced that things like this, I don't want to say little things, big things, like this is a good start.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Right, so thank you very much, all of you. It was wonderful having you and having this discussion. We could go on and on and on.
We very much could.
I just want to close with having the courage to say and see, to speak on racism, to see color and ethnicity and the value, and open your minds to learning from one another, no matter where you're from. And I think we can definitely get to some sort of place.
Let's continue
there.
the conversation.
Yep.
I went by Marta for a long time, not Marta, until my grandmother went, "What? ¿Qué está diciendo? Your name is Marta Maria, not Marta."
Yeah, but there's this immense pressure because this country, I feel, compartmentalizes and, does this thing of white here and everybody else down here.
Who are you? Who are you as a Korean American? Who are you as an African American?
I was never the one to conform. It was like, these are the cards that have been dealt. How can I use them to my advantage?
That this system is set up a certain way only to help a certain amount of people. And once you understand that, then you can operate through that. You don't need permission.